Hi, I'm Carrie from Maharat Learning Center. Today we're going to talk about the use of ABA principles in teaching children with learning difficulties. Specifically, we're going to discuss examples of behaviors that are typically in excess and deficit in the classroom and discuss techniques based on ABA to increase and decrease the behaviors in the classroom using the principles of behavior and using the functions of behavior. Before we jump into it, I just want to give a brief definition of applied behavior analysis and an introduction. So ABA stems from the science of behavior and is based on the principles of behavior studied by B.F. Skinner in the 1930s to the 1950s. Practical behavior management strategies stem from ABA and has been researched over the past 40 years. Practical behavior management strategies are applied in such a way that is socially significant and functional for the individual of concern. So let's remember these 2 points in the definition of ABA as we'll reference them again later on. Again, a main focus of ABA is developing adaptive repertoires of behavior and reducing those behaviors that are problematic. Some examples of common behaviors that occur in classroom settings that occur too frequently may include not responding to instructions or noncompliance, refusing to do things or defiance, throwing things, screaming, eating in class, talking out of turn or without raising their hand, running or walking around the classroom without permission, and not participating in group activities. You might also see some aggressive behaviors such as pinching, scratching, hitting others, pulling others' hair, or full-fledged tantrums, including laying on the floor, kicking and screaming, throwing, flipping over desks. The list is endless. Basically, anything that interferes with the overall classroom learning and management, children's learning, development, and success, and is harmful to the child, other children, or adults can be considered a challenging behavior in the classroom and should be worked on to be decreased. Some examples of common behaviors that occur in the classroom settings that don't occur frequently enough may include play behaviors. You may see that the child is playing by themselves rather than with others, or playing inappropriately with objects, or not playing at all. Raising their hand, giving a response when asked a question, responding to and complying with an instruction, participating in group activities, or doing work by themselves are also things that may not be occurring enough. Basically, any behavior that's not occurring or not occurring enough that are prerequisites to further academic and social development should be worked on to be increased. The 3 main principles of behavior are reinforcement, punishment, and extinction. Reinforcement involves providing a consequence for a behavior that increases or maintains the likelihood that that behavior will occur again in the future. The term punishment in the field of ABA literally means to reduce behavior. So we provide a consequence for a behavior that reduces the likelihood that that behavior will occur again in the future. With extinction, you withhold reinforcement after a behavior has occurred. You do not remove reinforcement, but you withhold giving it. So again, going back to one of the characteristics of ABA, we take the application of those 3 principles of behavior, reinforcement, punishment, and extinction, and we use them on issues that are socially important in an effort to produce practical change. So now we're going to talk about using these principles in the classroom to make practical changes. So specifically, we're going to talk about reinforcement to begin with. So we use reinforcement to increase behaviors that are not occurring enough, so the deficits. Some common reinforcement systems used in classrooms to increase appropriate behaviors and to decrease or prevent inappropriate behaviors include token economy systems and break systems. So we're going to talk about those too. Some common punishment systems in the classrooms to decrease inappropriate behaviors may include response cost, or more commonly referred to as taking away privileges. And again, extinction basically means planned ignoring. So we'll talk about all 3 of those. So now we'll jump into some examples of using reinforcement, so token economy or reward systems and break systems. There are basic components for a token economy system. First, you need to identify the desirable behavior or behaviors. Think about what behaviors you would like to occur more often. What behavior or behaviors are in deficit in the classroom? Make sure that the students know what behaviors they must perform to receive the tokens, display this visually, and explain verbally. With the visuals, you can be as specific or as general as you need to be, depending on the student's needs. Next, identify the tokens to be used. This can be anything from marbles to raffle tickets to points, stars, coins, hole punches, poker chips, smiley faces. You can even deliver tokens that form an image or a puzzle, and once the puzzle is complete, they access a reinforcer. You always pair the delivery of a token with social praise, which is the most natural reinforcer of all. This can be anything from a pat on the back to a thumbs up, to group verbal praise, to individual verbal praise. Reinforcement techniques are always a great place to start to prevent behaviors because it involves giving good things for good behavior, making inappropriate behaviors unnecessary and less likely to occur. Token economies are especially useful in the classrooms, and you can get really creative in your systems and your display. The purpose of a token economy is to strengthen individuals' desirable behaviors that occur too infrequently and to decrease their undesirable behaviors in a structured setting. An individual receives a token immediately after a desirable behavior and later exchanges it for a backup reinforcer. An example of a token economy system is a point and level system. So using this system, students earn points for specific behaviors and move through levels based on the number of points. For example, 1 to 10 points puts a student in the bronze category, 11 to 20 points puts a student in the silver category, and 21 to 30 points puts a student in the gold category. Each category gives a student access to different prizes, with prizes in the gold category being better in quality or quantity than the silver category, and the same for the silver category in relation to the bronze category. So that's just one example. There are many, many different types you could do. This is a visual example of how you could use a bingo game as a token economy in the classroom. You would catch them throughout the lesson exhibiting these behaviors following a loose schedule of reinforcement, or you can use a specific schedule of reinforcement and require the students or group of students to go for a certain period of time of exhibiting the behaviors and then delivering a token when they have met their requirement. So it may go something like this, and then bingo, and they receive their prize. Break systems can also be utilized to prevent challenging behaviors. You're essentially allowing brief periods of escape based on good behavior. And what a break means to each student may be different, so you have to know your student. A break could mean putting their head down. It could mean playing with a preferred activity. And again, it can be non-contingent, meaning it's for free. So when the child enters the classroom, they're given 10 break cards to use throughout the day, or it can be contingent, meaning they earn it. So when the child earns all their tokens, they're given 1 break card. And you would set limits by visually showing them this is how many break cards you get, say whenever you ask, and once they're all done, they're done. And obviously this is, it's much easier said than done. There are other things that are very important in teaching an individual to deal with limits on things that they want, such as coping skills, waiting skills, and problem-solving skills. And this is what we do at Maharat. We teach these core skills that are so important for an individual to use in multiple settings and different situations. So just remember, we can change or create behavior however we like. We just have to use reinforcement in the correct way. So now we're going to switch it over and talk about punishment and extinction briefly. One example of a punishment procedure is a response cost or taking away privileges, more commonly known maybe in a classroom setting. And so we decrease behaviors by responding appropriately when they occur. There are many, many different consequence procedures. I've just chosen these to speak about today. So a response cost, again, in the classroom setting, it's often called taking away privileges. And just like with reinforcement procedures, it's important that you determine beforehand before implementation, what behavior or behaviors are going to result in a response cost to help ensure consistency. You can even let your child know verbally and or visually what behavior will result in losing tokens, but be sure to not place too much emphasis on the problem behaviors and the removal of the reinforcers. The main emphasis should be on reinforcement for appropriate behaviors. It's important to note that all punishment procedures have the potential for side effects, such as emotional and aggressive reactions like screaming or hitting out that is out of the norm for them when you remove an item. So these are just some examples of using a response call. So the first example, a student is earning tokens for sitting crisscross in circle time, staying quiet in circle time, and keeping their hands in their lap. As a response call, if the student pulls another student's hair, one of their earned tokens is removed. Another example, a student's receiving a lot of verbal praise for playing nicely with their peers and sharing their toys, but if they grab a toy from another child without asking, that toy is removed from her or him. So another consequence procedure is called extinction, or more commonly known as planned ignoring. With extinction, you withhold reinforcement after a behavior. In the past, this behavior was followed by reinforcement, but now we are ignoring it. So the same with punishment, extinction has possible side effects, such as extinction burst, novel or new behavior, or spontaneous recovery. It's important to note, though, that if you are consistent with implementing proper antecedent modifications to prevent and decrease challenging behaviors, and you're teaching replacement behaviors, then extinction bursts and novel behaviors are often limited or even prevented altogether. So again, the two characteristics of ABA, we talked about the application of the principles of behavior to issues that are socially significant. And then another characteristic was the scientific study of why behavior occurs. So we're going to talk about that a little bit now. When we say the function of behavior, we're referring to why a behavior is occurring. So by knowing the function of behavior, we know how to set up reinforcement strategies to increase appropriate behaviors and to decrease or prevent problem behaviors. We know what new behaviors we should teach, and we know how to respond to a problem behavior to further decrease it. We can't really properly use the principles of behavior until we know the function. Behavior is communication and occurs primarily to gain access to a material reinforcer, or to gain power or control over something, to gain social attention, to escape something they do not like doing, and to gain internal stimulation. So at Maharat, often we will go into a classroom and conduct a functional behavior assessment where we observe the individual, we do teacher-parent interviews to determine the function. So that's the first step. So we would go in and do this and determine the function of a challenging behavior, and then we work with the classroom and the school in putting a proper plan in place to prevent, to decrease, to teach new skills. Okay, so this is just a little acronym to remember the functions of behavior. See, so sensory, internal stimulation, escape, they don't like doing something, attention, they want someone to look at them, or to give them some kind of social attention, or tangible, they want to gain access to a preferred item or activity. So just briefly, this is what we do. We go in and we do what we call an ABC analysis, or an antecedent behavior consequence analysis. And this is just an example written here. So in this scenario, Tom is on his own. He's not receiving attention from anyone. When he begins to scream, someone immediately comes over to him and scolds him. If you see this scenario happening over and over again, you would probably conclude that Tom's behavior of screaming is occurring primarily to gain access to attention. If you did conclude that this behavior was occurring for attention, your consequence procedure, in essence, would be not to give attention. No scolding, no hugging, no consoling, no helping. You could provide attention once there's been a pause of screaming and prompt an appropriate behavior, such as requesting for help and attention. If Tom doesn't know how to request help, attention, or help appropriately, you would teach this. In the second scenario, Erin wants to play with the iPad. When she cries, someone immediately gives her the iPad. Again, if you see this scenario happening over and over again, you might conclude that Erin's behavior of crying is occurring primarily to gain access to tangibles. If you did conclude this, then you would not want to give her the iPad for crying. You could provide the iPad once there's been a pause of crying and prompt an appropriate behavior, such as requesting it. If Erin does not know how to request for the iPad, you would immediately put in a procedure to teach her how to request things. In the third scenario, Ruth does not want to do her writing assignment. When she throws her chair, she is immediately taken out of the classroom for a walk. If you see this scenario happening over and over again, we would conclude that Ruth's behavior of throwing her chair is occurring to escape work. And then when we conclude this, we wouldn't give her access to escape from work for throwing the chair. We might provide escape once there's been a pause of throwing, or after an appropriate behavior, such as requesting for a break, like we discussed about previously. If she doesn't know how to request a break, we would teach her. And obviously there's other things. There's safety issues. How do we control, the situation to keep everybody safe? There's many other factors that go into it that we would help classrooms with, and that sort of thing. In the fourth scenario, Kian is getting no visual stimulation. When he puts his head on the table and watches the wheels on the train, he gets the visual stimulation. Nothing else has changed in his environment after the behavior. If you see something like this happening over and over again, you would conclude that Kian's behavior of looking at the wheels on the train is occurring primarily to access some kind of sensory stimulation. And if you did conclude this, you would not give any attention for the behavior. After a pause, you might redirect him and to play with a light-up toy, some kind of appropriate toy that he gets the same kind of feedback from. And we would put in a program in which he gets access to more appropriate methods of visual stimulation routinely. So for all of these strategies, we would want to put in appropriate prevention strategies, skill acquisition strategies, and consequence strategies. So we want to prevent, replace, and respond these behaviors that are maintained by attention, escape, tangible, and sensory. Okay, so these are just an example really quickly. I didn't go through, all of the functions of the behavior. Just I have one example of if there's a problem behavior that's maintained by attention. This is just an example of what a plan might look like, right? So as a reinforcement strategy, we are going to provide attention and a token when the child raises their hand. Again, we'll also provide attention and a token based on the absence of the problem behavior. And when the problem behavior does occur, we do not provide attention or a token economy. So these are just examples. The plan would need to be comprehensive and that sort of thing. And it depends on the specific situation and the individual of concern. It's not a hard and fast method. It's just an example of kind of putting everything we talked about today together. And that's it. Thank you so much.